First thing we're going to do is look at the reflectivity of the glass and how it reflects the sky. So you can't really see it in this rendering right now because it is so grainy. I didn't let the rendering run long enough for the reflection to really show that well. So I'm going to do some overlay on top of this. Hopefully it'll show up well, but at least you'll get an understanding of what you should be doing to create a reflection of sky. Reflections of skies are a little bit difficult, particularly sunsets and sunrises. The reason is the color rendering of the sky is so different on the side where the sun is versus where the sun is not. So I guess in order to kind of communicate what I mean, you can look at a panoramic of a sky at sunset. So my rendering happens to be, let's grab the snipping tool real quick. My rendering happens to occupy an area that's probably about yay big, something like that. If you look at these side by side, you can see sort of kind of some similarities, except the sun is at a little lower of an angle than in the selection I took than the other one. But the sky, but the sky itself is going to be a lot darker on the other side than it is on the side that the sun is on. So what I like to do is try to pick something that has a similar color depth, like or darkness rather. And then I'll pick like a panoramic like this, and then I'll just use the opposite side. It's a good way to sort of work on that, I think. So I like to, I'm just going to grab something probably in this range, and I'll work with that as my reflection. So I copied that image. I'll go back into Photoshop, and the good thing about reflections, at least most reflections, is that they don't have to be super crisp, because frequently they're going to come out a little bit warped or faded or blurred out a little bit anyway, just due to the nature of most materials. Glass is a little bit different depending on how reflective the glass is, but let's paste that in. And because it's a reflection, the scale of the sky can actually get a little bit smaller. You can crunch it down and show more sky in it, because basically, like the way optics work, from your point, I'll draw it on the board, right? So from your point of view to the facade of the building, you're going to look at it like that, but because of the angle of reflection, these things are going to keep spreading. So really you're seeing a lot more of the sky here than you're seeing behind the picture plane there, if that makes any sense. So that's why the scale can change. So this part's pretty simple. You can do it a bunch of different ways, but I just like to kind of free transform the thing. You don't really need to warp it very much, because it's essentially a mirror, right? You're not seeing a warped version of it. You're actually seeing a reflection of the element itself, and it's just going to get cut off. So I'll do something like that. Make sure your horizons approximately match. So my horizon, if I look at my image, is about right here. So I'm going to pull that down to about there. But because the bottom side of my reflection won't really match the top side of my reflection, I need to be very careful about cutting off and how I fade out what the reflection is at the bottom of my building. Okay, so the key is, I guess if you look at the draft render I'm putting together right now, this one hasn't gotten to a point where it got so grainy. Like it's weird the way it was going. Like it's grainy and then it's not. So this actually has the outline of the building a little bit, and then it'll get a little bit more grainy and it'll start to fade again, and then it'll start to get clear again later on. But anyway, so that outline of the building right here is where I want to start to trim it. Okay, so it won't be perfect this time around. I'm going to do more of like a fade trim than an exact trim. But that's the idea, is that you only need that portion that doesn't reflect the buildings that are part of your context. So that's why it's so important for us to model the context even behind the camera, if it's appropriate, if you're going to do reflections like this. Not all buildings are going to have reflections like that. So anyway, I'm going to drop that right there. And when I'm doing trimming and stuff like that, I'll usually just temporarily pull my layer to a layer, translucent layer like that, turn the opacity down, and just kind of pull it into a position that I think is appropriate. So I don't want to see only cloud, so I'm going to pull the cloud over a little bit so that the cloud just kind of leaks onto the facade there. Something a little bit like that should do it. And then you just need to be careful to kind of trim where that building actually was. So the good thing is, if it's not totally clear, I don't have to do it with this on. I can turn that off, and I can grab my Polygon picker tool, and I can just start selecting. You can zoom in as much as you want, but I can just start selecting exactly the area that I want right here. I think it was about there. I could adjust this later, but and then it kind of went across to, I think it was about there. Okay, now, a few things you can do. You can save this selection if you want. I don't think, did I show you guys saving a selection yet? I don't think I did. Oh my gosh, that is a huge oversight. You guys need to know how to do this. So let's say I'm working on a draft render, right? And it's kind of right, but you know, I might change it, whatever. But this is the selection that I want to reference a few times, right? Like I'm going to try a few things out, but I'm going to do it in such a way that I'm going to lose the selection, right? You can actually save this particular selection box right here into your file. So in order to do that, go to Select and hit Save Selection. And you actually have these like channels that you can put them in, but I generally just leave it right in the new channel. And I'll call this facade reflection. Okay, so now if I either accidentally click off of it, or if I mean to and I do something else and then I want to go back to it, I can just go to Select, Load Selection, go down to facade reflection, put that back up, just like that. So anyway, what I'm going to do with this is do a layer mask. So I'm going to go to Layer, Layer Mask, Reveal All, and I need to turn that off because what I'm going to do for this layer mask is erase everything. So let me just do like a fill. Okay, so I erase everything, and then I'm going to go to Select, Load Selection, and I'll load the facade reflection selection, and then go back in and make that appear. Okay, so nifty tool, nifty trick for you. You're going to need that frequently, so I suggest you practice that, you know, over the next week or so, enough that you understand it. All right. So anyway, that's the basic part of the reflection, and I can adjust this later because it is a layer mask. That's part of the power of the layer mask. So even though it's a draft and it's a little bit grainy, I'm going to replace it later with a better render, hopefully. I can go back and sort of like readjust where those boundaries are, you know, to get it to look a little better later. Anyway, so you know, the actual layer itself doesn't need to do that much. In fact, it's the opacity kind of does most of the work. You can kind of pull the opacity down just a hair. You could go into your layer settings, and you can kind of change a few of these, although I don't recall precisely which setting I'd want. I think screen is probably pretty good. I don't think you'd want color dodge in this case. Maybe overlay is pretty good too. So it just kind of gives you the opportunity to let some of the geometry behind pop out while not overwhelming the layers below, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, but you could do a few things. You could fade out if you want. So if you're interested in fading this, like you don't really want a hard edge where your buildings are, you're more than welcome to reload that selection. So you can load, say, facade reflection, and you can actually just grab like a grayscale or use the, I'll show you. If you turn on your brush and you use a large size faded brush, like a soft brush like this, that's actually going to create, let's go back to the alpha channel, that's going to create like a gray. So I can kind of soften, where am I here? Oh, that's going to white. You could paint it as black if you want, but you could just do something like this. That will soften it up so that it's not such a hard edge. So if I turned off, Well, let me show you on a blank layer. Let's make a black layer. You're not going to see that on black, are you? White. Is it too light? Oh, because it's on overlay. Oh, yeah. So that just kind of softens this edge down here a little bit. It doesn't make it such a overwhelmingly hard edge. So anyway, these are the subtle things that I think you should be working with. Where am I? I kind of lost where I was. There we go. Okay. Another thing we can do, and I actually did this yesterday. We were kind of talking about like what kind of overlays you can do to sort of, I guess, you know, spice it up or make it look a little bit more, for lack of a better term, dystopic. You know, like you kind of have this haze in the image that makes it feel like you're I don't know, you're in a dream a little bit. But I just did this one really quick, and I just did it with difference clouds. I'm not a huge fan of it, but you could change the color of it and make it more appropriate. Like, oh, I can't change that because it's difference clouds. There we go. There we go. Hue saturation, go to colorize. You can make it sort of like a warm yellow, something like that. So that kind of stuff is pretty easily done. All you have to do is just create a layer and then paint part of that layer with like a gray. You probably want it to go above everything and under your texture overlay.
It's like a mist.
Yeah, a little bit. So the thing you want to do in order to make this not look like you just painted it with a soft brush is you go to Filter, Render, and you can do either clouds or difference clouds. So difference clouds looks like that, and then you just change it into whatever kind of color rendering you want it to be. So actually, I probably want to do more. And generally, you want to kind of keep the frame. You don't want it to be like this floating object. That's why I painted more on the bottom. So let's do render difference clouds. I'm going to change the opacity, of course. I'm going to change probably how it's rendering over top of it. So we could do lighten, possibly. No. Let's use screen. Screen's probably pretty good for that. And then obviously you can change the colors too. So hue and saturation will let you change, you know, how light it is, how dark it is, whether or not it has like an ambient glow color. But again, if you're gonna do like colored clouds and haze and stuff like that, make sure you reduce the saturation, because like you make a green cloud, it's gonna seem like you're in a toxic wasteland. You know, so make it very, very, very subtle. You know, so anyway, those are two very simple things you can do. Is the sky reflection and some sort of overlay hazing and stuff like that. So. Any questions on that right now? That's it? Nothing? All right, cool. I'll expect to see this on all of your projects. Successfully executed.
You want the font?